Hello boaters. Well, it's Saturday the 17th of December and the canal has been frozen for the last week. Now last weekend it was about 1 centimetre thick and a few boats did manage to get through on the Sunday. That wasn't too bad. I did make a little sound recording which I put on social media of the ice breaking, but since then it's been a lot colder. It's been freezing every night. The last few nights have been like -7, -8, and the coldest I recorded was -9.6. During the day we've been getting approximately no warmer than +2, so it's been very cold. The ice has just been building up, getting thicker and thicker. And earlier in the week, when I wake up in the morning and start moving around, you can hear the sound of the ice crunching as the boat rocks. But for the last few days the boat's not really moving at all. The ice is so thick around it that it doesn't move when I move around inside. Also, I've been keeping the cats in at night. In the earlier part of the week I was worried because the ice was thin. If they fell in, they go through the ice, and well, there's some better thinking about. And then now the ice is thicker, they're quite safe, but these real sub-zero temperatures, I decided to keep them in anyway. I don't really want them going out. Midge Cat, he's got a very thick coat. He doesn't feel the cold too much. But Bushka, he's got quite a thin coat actually, and he doesn't tend to go out as much. He feels it more. But they're okay. I mean, they're letting them out during the day, and they're reasonably happy to stay in at night, although they do make a bit of a fuss and keep me awake sometimes. We want to go out, we want to go out, scratching on the cat flap and all that, but that's tough. I don't know if you could have heard me properly in that last section because I forgot to clip my microphone on. It was connected but over near the camera, so we'll put it on now and hopefully that's a little bit better. So like I've said, the ice has been building up, getting thicker and thicker each day, and that's true of most of the canal, but there's a small section of water behind my boat, between my boat and a lift bridge. There's also a big stone railway bridge crossing the canal at that point, and that short section up until Thursday morning had remained ice free. When I made the little mini vlog, which I'll show a little clip of now, that was the first morning that particular spot had frozen, so the ice there was very thin. Since then, of course, it has been building up in thickness, but it's still a lot less thick than most of the rest of the canal. And I was sitting in my boat about 10 o'clock this morning, this is Saturday morning, and I could hear ice noises. Bit hard to describe. They're kind of a low frequency, there's like a lot of echo on them. Quite an interesting sound, and I thought, I can't believe there's a boat trying to move in this weather. What on earth is making that noise? But I got my sound recorder. I thought, well, if some idiot does try and break through, that's going to make a tremendous noise, and that'd be a good sound to record. Even the coal boat would struggle in this sort of ice. I'm not sure how thick it is at the moment. I've not actually tested it, but it's going to be more than 2 inches thick. Could be more than that quite easily. But anyway, yeah, I've got the sound recorder all ready to go, and these sounds had stopped. So I thought, I wonder what it was. So I look out the back door, and on this newly frozen patch of ice, there's a woman standing on it with her male partner on the bank, holding his phone up, videoing her standing on it. They must have been thumping the ice to try and test its thickness or something like that. But that was so risky because that ice was so much thinner than everywhere else, and I thought she's going to go through at any moment. Luckily she was close to the edge, but even if she'd gone through, yeah, we could have pulled her out, but she would have been more than waist deep in water, and that's not nice at this time of year. So I called across to them and warned them that that bit was definitely much thinner ice, and luckily they decided to move on. But that was a potential accident that could have happened. The problem with ice is to be relatively safe on ice, I believe it needs to be about 4 inches thick, and I think the ice probably in that spot, I doubt if it was more than an inch thick. So, you know, it's an accident waiting to happen, really. Another problem with ice is that you don't get any warning with it. You know, it either supports you or it doesn't. If you can hear a cracking noise, it's probably too late to get out before you get, you know, it's that dodgy. Always wary about ice. I think the worst freeze up that I've ever experienced on the canals was around about 1996-97, and I remember that I was at Pigeons Lock, just below Pigeons Lock on the South Oxford Canal, and the canal froze on Christmas Eve, and it didn't thaw out until the end of January, so it was about 5 weeks. Solid ice, and it got really thick. It got up to about 6 inches thick at one point, and during January, of course, we did have some nice warm days. It was okay, but it wasn't enough to melt the ice, and then there'd be another cold spell, and it would just keep it going, and it just lasted for for 5 weeks, you know. I ran out of water because no one could move. The coal boat couldn't get through. It was a bit of a problem, really, and I was working nearby at the time, and there was one lunchtime that I had to come back to the boat for some reason. Can't remember what it was. And I got back to the boat, and on the ice was a whole class full of kids running around on it. Now, although the ice was about 6 inches thick, that bit was actually fairly safe, I should imagine. But they were running around, and they were running towards the lock. And you've got the lock, and you've got the little overflow weir that goes around the lock. Anywhere where there's moving water, the ice will either not freeze or it'll be a lot thinner. And these kids were running up very close to the edge of where the ice began, and that was really, really dangerous, because I knew it was desperately thin there. The fact that they were kids and lighter probably helped. But there was a class full of kids, and their teacher was standing on the towpath yelling at them to get off the ice and come back, and they were totally ignoring her, and they were just running all around the canal. You know, they did come back when I yelled at them, and I don't know where these kids were from. Probably the local school in Kirtlington. I don't know, but that was so lucky that no one died then. You know, the thing is when lakes or canals freeze, it might be perfectly safe in some spots. If you've got like 4 inches of ice, it's probably okay, but there's nothing to say that that'll be consistent over the whole body of water. It might be thicker or considerably thinner in other places. You know, it's really a very dodgy thing to do, to go on the ice in this country. It doesn't really normally get cold enough to freeze it to really safe levels. If we lived in Canada or somewhere like that, it was probably a different story. But I mean, since that big freeze that happened all those years ago, I mean, eventually, of course, it did melt, and I was able to move again. And this is the thing with ice thawing. When it's got to a certain thickness, it can take a long time to thaw. You know, it quite easily could be a week after it's warmed up before you can move again, you know, because it's quite slow to melt. The thing that does tend to melt it quickly, though, is if it rains a lot, because then you've got more relatively warm rain, and then a lot of runoff of water from the land as well. That'll melt it very quickly. So that's what's forecast for us. Tomorrow it's supposed to warm up quite considerably, start raining, get very windy for the 2 or 3 days. That'll probably sort the ice out, and I'll be able to move probably middle of next week, but there's no guarantees on that. What can happen is, especially if boats have been breaking the ice, is that it breaks up into slabs, and then the slabs will go underneath other slabs of ice, and other slabs will go on top of other slabs of ice, and then where you might have had 1 inch of ice, you now maybe have 4 inches of ice, because they've all stuck together. And you can have it could be very irregular like that along the canal. So those areas which have got the big slabs of ice in, they can remain frozen for a lot longer than the thinner areas. Also, you'll find on the canal there'll be certain stretches which are probably sheltered. They never see the sun, you know, and those bits will stay frozen longer. So the canal might look, you know, you might look out one day and you think, oh, the ice is gone, it's thawed out, I'll move. And you set off, you go half a mile down the canal, you go around a corner and suddenly it's thick ice again. This can happen. So what I shall probably do is when I do move, I'll just cycle to where I plan to go, just to make sure that the whole way is clear, because if I've got to break through ice, that would terrify the cats, you know, and it damages boat blacking as well. That's not really a problem in my case because I haven't got any left, but I don't want to frighten the cats. I think it's quite safe to move in ice if it's up to about 1/4 of an inch thick. That probably won't damage the blacking too much unless you do an awful lot of it. And it's very easy, it just makes a little crackling noise as you go through. But once it starts getting thicker than that, you know, if it's 1/2 an inch or so, then that will take the blacking off quite badly. It won't damage a steel hull, but it will take the blacking off. I've boated through some very thick ice in the past, I have to confess, you know, needs must sometimes. The thickest I've ever tried to break through is about 2 inches, and it's very hard to steer, because narrowboats are quite good at breaking through in a straight line, but because ice forms in different sort of thicknesses, you may find that the course of your ice breaking tends to drift off to the left or to the right, and then it can be very difficult to straighten up again, because although boats can break the ice the pointy end way, the side of the boat is very hard. If you've got to try and turn around or correct a course, then you've literally got to go along the side of the boat with your boat pole and smash the ice by hand in order to try and either correct the steering or to turn around. And if it's thick, of course, then that's very, very hard work. Also dangerous as well, walking along the gunnel when it's icy. So I think we'll wait until it's well and truly thawed before I move. Anyway, to change the subject, I've in one of the last talking in front of the camera vlogs I had a new light for my camera, a ring light, but that was reflecting very badly off my glasses. At the moment there is a reflection, but that's the window in front of me. But I've got another ring light now, and I've moved them to different positions. So there's one there, and then there's another one off to the other side there. And because they're at my side, we're not getting such bad reflections anymore, and a more even light, so that's an improvement, I think. Anyway, the Canal and River Trust have issued a notice to say that if you're supposed to move on every 14 days, that doesn't really apply when the canal's frozen up. Don't worry about it too much. They won't take any action, but I don't know. In the past, I've not really had any problems with this myself, but in the past I've heard quite a few stories of boaters being harassed for not moving, and then the CRT, or British Waterways as it was before, failing to sort of remember that the canal was closed due to a flood or a damaged lock or whatever, or ice. So it remains to be seen whether they will take this cold snap into consideration. But I'll be here in this same spot for 14 days tomorrow, so I'll only be a few days over anyway. So it all depends. There's absolutely no way I can move now because the ice is just far too thick, so I need to move on as and when I can. I don't like staying in one place for too long anyway. I like to move around. that's the part of the fun of it, but yeah, we've got to wait for the ice to melt. Anyway, well, thank you very much for listening to this waffle. I'll see you next time. Midge Cat's just come in from outside. He wasn't very happy because I was sitting by the fire, and that's his spot. Right, Midge? He's very much an outdoor cat whenever he can be. Bushka's still outside somewhere.